The following edition of Interactive Wrestling Radio gets extremely real. The views and recollections expressed by our guest do not reflect those of Interactive Wrestling Radio, the Wrestling Epicenter, or Epicenter Entertainment LLC.
This is Trenesha Biggers, and you are listening to Interactive Wrestling Radio.
You're listening to Interactive Wrestling Radio, featuring the interactive interview, courtesy of WrestlingEpicenter.com.
Welcome back to Interactive Wrestling Radio. On the Newsmaker line with us right now is the former TNA knockout Rhaka Khan, Trenesha Biggers. Miss Biggers, on the line with us.
I am here.
It's great to talk to you. I'm so honored that you agreed to do this show with us, to do this interview with us. I know that you've been getting a lot of requests, so again, thank you for agreeing to do ours.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Thank you for reaching out.
Sure. A quick question before we kind of get into the chronological wrestling thing is, it's been a while since we heard from you. How are you doing, and what have you been up to in the last couple of years?
Oh, in the last couple of years, I've been, I guess, living the American dream, if you will. I got married, had babies, and most recently I've been kind of thrust into industry that I never foresaw myself going into, and that is actually two industries, if you will, if you want to call them that. But I've been diligently pursuing social justice for people from all walks of life, and I've also been growing in my faith, and it's therefore birthed somewhat of a ministry out of me, which was surprising to me. So it's a little bit of a flip from the wrestling world, if you will, almost like a polar shift, if you will.
Right, great. And one of the things you said to me, and I hope you don't mind me mentioning it, was that wrestling is not your God. And when you said that, it kind of took me by surprise, because I just didn't figure Rhaka Khan, as I knew you on TV, saying that particular line. So I guess you have made a lot of changes in your life. Yeah,
I mean, I don't know if I would necessarily call them changes. I'm so sorry, the neighbor's dog is barking again. I'm going to go in a quieter place. So yeah, I think that the bottom line, the common denominator with all of the issues, if you will, which I don't see them as issues, but maybe other people perceive them that way, was the fact that I just refused to bow. And although I wasn't necessarily living the most righteous lifestyle myself, I've never been one for idolatry. So, with wrestling, that's kind of part of the job description. And the people that are there currently have been there, and people that worked there 20 or 30 years ago, they know it's true. They're kind of bound by the wrestling gods, and I'm not controlled by that, never have been. So there may be some things that I've said, although they come from a pure place, it comes off as blasphemy in the wrestling industry. But like I said, I don't worship wrestling. Wrestling is not my God. It's not the end all be all. It really breaks my heart to see how many people have died because they're worshiping wrestling and not aware of who they are themselves without it. A lot of people feel completely lost, and they have no identity without wrestling or without the characters that were built for them on television. And we've seen it happen like in several aspects of the entertainment industry. How like child stars have no idea who they are anymore. And
right.
A lot of these people in wrestling that the fans idolize, they don't realize that these people themselves don't even know who they are. And one thing I've always known who I am. So when someone wants me to go against who I am fundamentally, that's where, a lot of conflict, if you will, may occur. And, I'm sitting back like, what's the problem? Like, I'm sticking to my morals, and my morals are right and they're just. And you want me to do something wicked. And I know a lot of people in the business, they always seem to have this little saying backstage about, like, it's kind of like a known thing. Like the dirtier and the grimy you are, like the further you get. And I've seen it over the years since I haven't been in the business. I see a lot of individuals that are good people, and those are the ones who get the short end of the stick. You know, being a good person doesn't really pan out too well in that business.
That can certainly be the case. Well, we're going to do a little bit of chronological, and then we'll get to the stuff that we were discussing, or started to allude to a little bit. I guess my question would be, before you got into wrestling, were you a wrestling fan? Because you did the Diva Search, and that's really outside of the box for the average person.
Yeah, well, see, here's the craziest thing. I don't know if you've caught on to this, you know, but prior to like the last 5 to 8 years in wrestling, there were only a handful of women. You could probably count them on 1 to 2 hands that had worked for the Fed. And I remember when I was a senior in high school catching a commercial for the Tough Enough audition for the very first Tough Enough. And I come from a very strict, and I want to call it like a religious home. I wasn't even allowed to watch wrestling, although I did sneak and watch it when I could. And that was like something that was like banned from my household. And when I was about 17 years old is when they did that first Tough Enough competition. They had the auditions going, and I was like, I have to ask. Like, so I went to my mom, and I was like, WWE is doing an open audition. I want to go to this Tough Enough competition. And she gave me the response that I expected, of course, which was a blank stare, which meant no. And I was like, okay. So, you know, I went ahead and I watched the whole thing. And then, like, at the end, you remember who won that Tough Enough competition?
Was that Shaniqua?
Right. The person who people mistake me for all the time. That goes back to the, like, on one hand, you could count how many African-American females were ever in the wrestling business at that point. And when she won, she fit my description. She was a basketball player. You know, she's like 6 foot tall, athletic, dark-skinned as well, you know. And I went to my mom. I was like, look who won. I told you, like, I was supposed to be there. I was like, I would have gotten it, you know. And it kind of ended with that. I was a 3 or 4 sport athlete in high school, like on a very high caliber. I was getting recruited for several sports, and I ended up playing volleyball and basketball in college, and ended up at Florida State playing volleyball. And it's funny because, like, it came full circle. My athletic career was coming to an end, and I still had that drive inside of me to, like, work in showbiz. And so I was looking actually on Craigslist back in 2005. I think it was around like May of 2005. I was living in Tallahassee still, and I was looking online for auditions in LA. And under the audition, there was literally it said WWE $250,000 Diva Search contest. And I clicked on it, and I was like, what? It was back then, like, Craigslist was a little bit more used by, like, non-creepy reasons. And WWE actually had an ad on Craigslist, and I immediately, I didn't even have any modeling photos. I was like such an athlete, you know. And it was weird because this creepy guy with a camera who called himself a photographer, he did like the Girls of FSU calendar and things like that. He had asked me to shoot for the calendar maybe like a month before. And I was like, okay, I guess I could do that, you know. And so I had 2 pictures, 2 professional photos I'd ever taken, and I or maybe like 5, and I uploaded the ones he had just taken like a month before, sent in my stats, and my phone rang almost like within the same day. I think it was the same day I got a call back, and it was, I want to say maybe a Jill up in the office. Someone up in the office called me the same day and told me that they wanted me to come out for the competition. As soon as I saw the ad, I don't know what it was, but I knew, I was like, this is my second chance. And I can't even tell you how I got from Los Angeles back to Tallahassee. I do know that I had a one-way plane ticket there because that's all I could afford at the time. And I was like, whatever, when I get there, I'll get there. and I'll figure out how to get home later. Like no hotel reservations, no money to get one, and it's kind of like it felt like a Cinderella kind of story because like when I landed in LA, never been to LA before. They had it at a big hotel. There was one location for the hotel at the airport, and then there was another one like closer to Hollywood. I'm assuming that it's the one where the plane landed. So I'll go around. I'm looking around for like the Diva Search contest. I'm like, where is it? And they're like, oh no, it's at the other hotel down in Hollywood. And the manager of that hotel was like, oh, I'm on my way there. I'll take you. So like, I was like, really? And it was it would have been like 2 or 3 hours for me to get there otherwise. So he was like, let's go to the roof. Let's hop in my car. So it was like a chariot, like waiting on me on the roof of the car. This story is like so crazy. And so, and also I was crazy to hop in a car with a guy to tell me he's going to take me to this audition, right? Looking back on it, but he did, and he didn't try to kill me or anything. So, I remember he was in like some drop top, some kind of super duper Mercedes creep type car, so we're flying down the freeway. He gets me there to the audition, and he's like, I think you're going to get this. And I was like, yeah, I feel like I'm meant to be here. Like, I know I'm supposed to be here. And I get to the audition, and I remember like days, it was like over the course of like a week or so, maybe like 3 to 5 days. And I remember at the competition thinking that when I walked in there that I was unique, right? I was like, I'm going to be the only 6 foot tall Black girl here with an athletic background. I walk in the audition and I'm seeing every single fitness model off every cover of every magazine. I'm seeing actresses. I'm seeing like people that are on back then. What was that show? Where they were like holding the suitcases. Remember that show that had like the millions of dollars in it? And then girls from like The Price is Right. And like I'm seeing all these girls that I've been seeing with like successful careers already. And I'm like, okay. And then I saw probably about 75 6 foot tall, beautiful Black women there when I got there. So I was like, okay, so much for that. Let me see what I can pull out now. And I remember we were like in the audition room, and the days would go by, and like on the first day, I remember people literally getting cut in the hallway. Like they'd walk by and they'd be like, "Are you here? Are you in the Diva Search?" And they were like, "Yeah." And then the person would be like, "You're cut." And I was like, "Oh my God! Like let me hide," And they hadn't even gone into the audition yet. And I think that what happened is I pulled some skills out of my hat at the audition that I had to conjure up something. I'm like, okay, so I thought being athletic and coming in and just being in phenomenal shape was going to get it. And I'm like, no, like they need a lot more than that. And they did a round where it was a talent. And I was like, okay, my talent is sports. How am I going to play a sport? And then I remembered, so like a little bit about my background. I grew up if you can't tell by my dialect, I grew up in a very non-ethnic place. So the only like exposure I ever had to anybody that resembled me physically was like through MTV or like BET. So I really, really, back then, my favorite, I loved rappers, and that was one of my other things. I wanted to be a female rapper when I was growing up. And I had all the lyrics to Waterfalls memorized from the TLC song, and Left Eye's part. And so I was like, oh yeah, I can rap. I'm like, most people can't rap that fast. And so when they asked me to do my talent, I went in there and I busted a few rhymes for them, right? And I had no idea what they were looking for. But I look back on it and, everything that I was doing, it kind of like fit. And so I noticed that every day, like it was getting, the crowd was getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And I think it was about like 3 or maybe 4 days. And yeah, it was over the course of like 3 to 4 days, I think. And I remember on the 3rd day, there was only 3 Black girls left. If the 3rd day was the last day or the 4th day, there was like the day before that, there was like 3 Black girls left, and everyone else was like beautiful and of a like Caucasian race, right? It was myself, Crystal Marshall, and a fitness model named Alicia. She's very, very famous in the fitness world, and she's gorgeous, right? And like she's been on the cover of Oxygen like 150 times, and like that, she was one of the ones that shocked me that like I was had to compete with her. And then like the next day went by, and then it was just me and Crystal. And Crystal looked at me, and I remember her saying, she's like, "Which one of us do you think it's going to be? Because you know they're not going to pick two of us." And I was like, I don't know. Like, so then the next day comes and we're in the top 25, and we're standing there. Lined up, and they're getting ready to make the final cut before the reality show. And I remember Jonathan Coachman approaches me first. And he walked up to me. He said, "You're athletic, you have stage presence, you have charisma, you have every single thing that we're looking for in a WWE diva." And I was like, "Thank you, Jesus." And he's like, "You're cut." And I was like, "What?" And so he was like, "You're cut." Like, it was like so crazy. I was like, all right. So then I'm doing the walk of shame, you know, that everyone sees. Like, it's really weird when you're doing that because the camera is like right in your face. And so you have to act like you don't see it and you don't want to cry. And I'm like, I don't even have a ride home. Like, I don't know why I came here, you know, like. And so I walk out of the door, and one of the executive assistants with WWE, as soon as I got out of the camera shot, I'm like going back into the dressing room to go get my stuff and like call my mom and see if she'll fly me back to Tallahassee. And someone grabs me and says, "Hey, come in here. Someone wants to talk to you." And they pull me aside into this room. And when I get in there, it was Kevin Dunn. And yeah, and when I get in there, he was like, "We don't want you on the show." He was like, "We don't want to expose you to TV first." He was like, "We want to send you to developmental." He was like, "Would you be interested in the contract?" So I literally basically got signed behind the scenes on the spot at the audition. And I was actually relieved once I started watching the Diva Search on TV because it was brutal. Like the things they were making those girls do and the things that they had planned for them, I can see why now they were like, "Nah, she's not. We'll kill her off if we put her on the show," you know? So that's
Was
how it
that
all
the
started.
one that Layla won?
No, this is the one that Ashley won.
Ashley Massaro, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can actually still remember the moment Ashley walked into the room at the audition. I don't know why. And it was weird, too, because everyone's like, "Oh, she's going to win." They were like, they already picked her, which I don't know if that's true or not. But I do know that when she came in, she looked a lot different than everybody else, even though she was blonde and petite, you know, like she had a different presence about her. And that's why I'm saying, like, I still remember the moment when she walked into the room, whether she was pre-selected or not, she still definitely had something that everybody else did not have, you know?
Well, I mean, the previous year they had somebody pre-selected to win, and nobody liked her, so they went with Christy Hemme, who actually, you know, won the votes. So
yeah,
pre-selecting doesn't always work.
Yeah, and you know, at that time, I didn't know that, like, these reality competitions, because reality TV was really picking up at that point, I didn't know it was a work anyway. Like, it probably took me several years later to realize, like, that it was a work from the beginning, you know? Like Tough Enough and all that other stuff,
So one of our buddies
yeah.
on this site, and not to bash, but one of our buddies, and sincerely I do mean that, was Marty Jannetty. And he actually had a big hand in training you to wrestle.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on the rocker?
Yeah, you know, okay, so it's funny because right after all this Diva Search fiasco, when I went back to Tallahassee, I was actually a trainer at Gold's Gym down there in Tallahassee, and Marty was working out there this whole time. I didn't know it. Had been working there for like 2 years, and my general manager at the gym, when I came back from the Diva Search, I didn't even know about the internet. I didn't know about wrestling dirt sheets, websites. Like, I didn't know about any of that. So I was confused how the manager at my gym knew I got signed. And because he's an awesome indie worker himself, and I didn't know that he had found out about me getting signed. So he pulled me in the office. He's like, "Hey," he was like, "Congratulations, like, like, that's crazy. He's like, you just left and went and got signed by WWE. You know, he was working at out of Georgia and North Florida for like years, you know, and then working. Chris Stevens. Yeah. Back then he was with Bad Company. Yeah. So he and Marty are good friends, and he pulled me aside. He goes, you know, Marty Jannetty is like in the gym right now. And I was like, huh? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, what? And so Marty had like cut his hair or something, you know, like my memory of Marty at that point was like, you know, the 80s version. So he had his hair cut, you know, Marty's very modest, you know, and very quiet if you don't know him, right? So he's not like in the gym, like hulking up and like rocking out. So like I didn't really like notice that it was him. And so within like 24 to 48 hours, Chris, Marty, and my friend Bobby Powell, who was he was an indie worker as well, but he's actually a politician out of Florida now, an elected official. The three of them got together and we started training with Marty first in the spin room at the gym, and then Marty had a ring set up in a warehouse, and so then we started going there and training in the ring. And within like the first week, I mean, it was unbelievable. Honestly, I learned more from Marty in 1 week than I learned in a month or two at Deep South. And I'll just put it that way. Yeah. Well, I wasn't given a reason. I don't know, like there was a couple of controversial things going on a couple years ago, and so I went ahead and I just posted an email that I had sent out concerning Bill's behavior. It's weird because when I very first met Bill DeMott, he actually picked me up from the airport in Atlanta when I landed there to report to Deep South. And I remember him walking up to me and saying, "You're Trenesha, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." He goes, he's like, "That's what I'm talking about." He was like, "See this whole airport and all these people here in this airport?" He was like, "I could pick you out of the whole crowd." He was like, "You're supposed to be here. That's why you're here." And I was like, okay. And then we get to training, and I don't know politics at this point at all. And if I did, I don't know if it would have made any difference. But we get to training, and I had already learned quite a bit from Marty and from Chris and from Bobby before I got there. And they were kind of assuming that when I got there that I was going to be like typical model that got signed because she did Playboy. But, you know, I came in like serious about wrestling and learning it. That's why I started training before I ever went to camp. And when they were doing certain drills, I'd be like, "Oh no, I already know how to do this. Marty showed me this." And so that became a tagline after that at Deep South. He'd be like, "Oh, did Marty Jannetty already teach you this? Well, you already know how to do this, right? Because Marty taught you." Like, and then it just spiraled downward from there. I think that if I would have never told him and I would have played dumb, you know, like I didn't know how to do anything, I think I think that if I would have played like I didn't know anything, then it would have just went a little smoother. But I remember speaking with Marty throughout the situation, being like Bill keeps saying, "Oh, Marty Jannetty said." Every time I come every time I came to practice, he's like, "Did Marty Jannetty tell you to come to practice today?" And like I only had mentioned his name like once or twice. And Marty was really kind of surprised about that because, you know, he thought from what he had known that, you know, him and Bill were friends. And there's so many people that I've interacted with from Bill's era that were like, "Wait, Hugh Morris? Like, no way." Because like back when I was trying to tell people like how psychotic Bill was treating a hand-picked select few students, they were like, "That's not the Bill I know." You know, they're like, "What?" You know, and like it's great that it all finally came out, but let's think about all the casualties that happened along the way. Well, this isn't the first time it came out. Like this is like the third or fourth time that it came out. It's just finally the first time something was done about it, you know? I think that social media has caught on fire so much they couldn't suppress it this time. But actually, before I was released, Ricky Steamboat had approached me and let me know that they actually did have a gimmick for me. And I was pretty excited about that because I had been valeting the Shane twins, which everyone told me going back to Linda Miles was a recreation of her and the Basham brothers. I don't know if you remember Mike and Todd Shane, the Gemini. Yeah, so I was their manager down at Deep South. And they got called up to TV, and then I wasn't, and no explanation was given. And I was just kind of like, okay, all right. And I remember the whole time I was down there managing, I kept asking Bill, you know, since I was practicing like 8 hours a day, going to two sessions a day, taking like 1,000 bumps, you know, a practice and all of that. I was like, you know, can I have a match? And like it had been so many months had gone by, and I started seeing other girls like come in and get matches right away, girls that weren't signed, girls that hadn't been training as long as I had with them. And every time I asked him for a match, he would just be like, are you sure you're ready? Like, I was like, yeah, I'm ready. I'm like, I'm ready. Can I have a match? I was like, I'm never going to be ready if I don't do this. And I had actually been, because we were doing so much drilling, my friend Jennifer Thomas, she used to wrestle as Karma. She actually sold her name to WWE, to Kia, for them to use for Kia. Yeah, she was training with Curtis Hughes back then in Atlanta with WWA 4. And she had told me I needed to come with her to their training. She's like, why don't you come check out this training, because they'll actually teach you some stuff. Because I do remember, like, it had been like 3 or 4 months that had gone by, and I had never been shown how to do an arm drag. Like, all we were doing was getting murdered in practice, like drills. Like, there was no wrestling going on, except for like with the people who already knew how, because that group of people that I was with was a very highly skilled group of wrestlers. One of the people that stick out to me the most is Mike Knox. He helped me out immensely. He was actually the person that I remember. Okay, so I couldn't be taught how to do arm drags. Let's put this in perspective. But like on my second week in training, without really having any solid base of training, because Marty only had a couple of months with me, like 3 months before I had to go. Bill has me get in and take a backdrop from Mike Knox. You know how tall he is, right? And yeah, and he's like, honestly, like, he's legit one of the best workers and very safe. And I remember looking at people take backdrops, and if you have never taken one and you don't know about these high flying moves and these big bumps, that looks horrifying, right? And and so he was like, all right, get in and do a backdrop. You want to wrestle? And I was like, okay. And I think he put me with Mike because he knew Mike was the safest one there. And I did know how to do the bump. So he was like, just do your bump. And I was like, oh my God. So I went in and I went ahead and Mike launches me like 25 feet in the air because he's already like 20 feet tall. And I remember just do my bump. But I forgot to exhale when I hit the ground. I was still holding my breath because it was terrifying dropping from that high. And everybody was like, oh, she did it. Like, and like everybody was like, you did it. But there was one problem. When I hit the ground, it looked like I took the perfect bump, but I actually could not feel anything. I couldn't feel my arms. I couldn't feel my legs. I couldn't feel my chest. The only thing I could do is move my head side to the side and look over at, I think Mac Johnson was standing right there. I looked over at him and I said, I can't feel anything. And then I saw Bill. I was like, I don't feel anything. Like, I was like, I'm paralyzed. I was like, I cannot feel anything. And they're like, oh, you're fine. It's nothing. They're like, it's just a stinger. And I was like, no, I'm not kidding you. I don't feel anything at all. And I remember Bill got into the ring, and he started trying to like, like rub my legs and they were like, just breathe, just relax. And it took almost like, it was scary. I might be over exaggerating because of the state I was in, but I'm probably not. It was a long, excruciating about 15 minutes before I started to feel anything again in my body. Yeah, so those are like one of my first memories there. And I remember like, Bill like, all right, well, this isn't for you, right? Like you're ready to quit, right? And I was like, no. Like I'm an athlete. Like I came from coaches like Bill. But when I say like Bill, I mean people that are hard on you. So I figured that he was being hard on me because he wanted the best for me. So I'm still thinking like a Seminole, like this is for the team. Like he's being hard on me because he wants me to do well. And then like it got to the point where I realized, no, this guy actually hates me and he wants me dead. Like, and like it doesn't matter how hard I work. Like it's never going to be good enough. Yeah, so I don't really know, like, and I don't have any animosity towards Bill. I want to make that clear. There's been a few times after my Bill DeMott experience that I've actually thanked Bill, like quietly to myself, like if it wasn't for Bill, like I wouldn't have known that people are like this. And it was because he taught me a lot, like talk about school of hard knocks. But it's unfortunate that he's teaching me lessons that someone probably taught him first, it's just like a cycle of abuse. But off of the mental aspect, the other thing was, I'm probably jumping a little too far ahead, but I remember when I was at TNA and I had to, they staged it, and I figured this out later. They brought an indie girl in. I'm not going to mention her name. She's respected on the indies or whatever. They brought an indie girl in, and they staged it as a knockout workout. So, but it was really a tryout for me because word got around that I was getting ready to get a big push at TNA.
Right.
And so someone started a uproar, and everyone went along with follow the leader, and they were like, she needs to prove herself. So they staged this training session, and the training session consisted of a girl from the indies that was supposed to be like someone to fear. And and listen, this is what I'm thinking, Bill DeMott. When I saw her, I'm like, you're nothing. Like, I've been through Bill DeMott. Like, you have no idea. Like, and so they were trying to drill me because I noticed like no one else had to do the drills as many times as I did. Like, like little combo sequences, up and over, swing and a miss 20 times, drop down, leapfrog, international spot, things like that. And so I was like, okay, I'm a drill queen. I may not have learned like how to wrestle at Deep South, but I am like literally, I am a 5-star driller. Okay. And so when they got in there and started doing the drills, I could see the disappointment on everyone's faces that I was like drilling circles around everyone. And anybody that hears this interview, you guys know it really happened. So they ended up cutting the session short, and everyone was just kind of standing around. I remember Scott, this is one of my favorite days in wrestling, actually. Scott D'Amore was there at the ring, and we had kind of just got off the whole make Trenesha try out because she doesn't deserve to be pushed. And
go through the fit about it, or is that not something you want to say?
Oh, I don't care. I mean, yeah, it's Kia. Awesome Kong. But
right,
she has like other people with her, but she was like the ringleader. And, she's like, I've always had a relationship with her like a sister. We were always very close. The things that I know about her, people, and I'm not going to go into that kind of stuff because I'm not that kind of person, but the things she didn't want anyone else to know, those are the things she would let me know when she needed help, And so, we all have our Judas, right?
Right.
I'll just leave it at that.
Well,
I met her actually right after I got released from Deep South. I met her within probably like 2 or 3 months of that. I got a call the same day I got released from Deep South. I got a call from Mark Jindrak, who was over in Japan working.
Right.
And he had hit me up and was like, hey, I heard you got released. And here I am. I still don't know about the internet. I'm like, how do you know? Like, I just got fired. And he was like, no. He was like, don't worry about it. He was like, they are looking for you over here. He's like, they're putting together a group of 3 black girls, and they needed a 6-foot-tall black girl. Like, do you think you'd be interested? I was like, what? Tokyo? Yeah, like, heck yeah. And so when I went over there, the group that they were putting me in, it was myself and Kia and a couple of other girls. And that's the way our toxic friendship began.
Well, you ended up at TNA, and there's been a lot of talk of late with the women's revolution, as it's termed now, with the ladies getting a chance to main event pay-per-views and really getting some more TV time than ever before. That the TNA knockouts are really where it all started. As one of the TNA knockouts who maybe is not talked about as much as maybe they should be, what is your take on that? Do you think you guys kind of did kickstart what we see today?
You know, I am so blessed that I got to be a part of that at that time. You know, I had kind of hit a little frustration after putting in a whole year of like the brutal Deep South thing. And then there was like the silver lining. I got to immediately go wrestle in Tokyo, which every wrestler wanted to do. You know, every wrestler wants to make it to the Tokyo Dome. And you know, I never had one match at Deep South. And then I had my first match actually in Japan. Like, my first set of matches were at Cork and Hall. Like, these are places that people are striving to get. So it was like every time someone would try to knock me down, I'd get another notch, you know. And I don't give any credit of it to myself. I think God was pushing me through this whole journey. Even the way I got signed to TNA. If you guys remember a character on TNA named Peyton Banks, Bonnie, she was my neighbor and a friend of mine. Like, we used to walk our dogs together. And she was signed to TNA at the time. And I remember her being like, hey, ride with me to Orlando. And I was like, all right, you know, because at that time I was still no threat to anyone. So everybody was my friend still. I was like, y'all go hang out with everybody. And so I went up there with her that day, and I'm just hanging out, you know, chilling, saying hey to everybody I hadn't seen for a while because I'd been over in Japan or whatever. And it was weird because me and Kia were really good friends still at this point. There had been no strife or anything, and she didn't even tell me that she got signed to TNA, so I thought that was weird. I should have known something was up then, right? Right. But anyway, long story short, I got to TNA, and I'm just chilling, and I remember at the end of the day when everybody was wrapping up going home, actually midday, Dutch Mantell approached me, and he was like, hey, we got something for you. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah. He was like, we're going to put you with Scott Steiner. And I was like, huh? Like, I wasn't there for that. Like, I really was just there to hang out. Like, I had no intentions on getting a job there or working there. My focus was on getting back to WWE, and I was happy to go to this. I mean, no offense to anybody there, but, you know, I was happy just to go to see this other promotion. That was my mindset. And so I was just kind of like taken back by that. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll do it. You know, like I had a full-time job at the time, and he told me that it would work around my schedule and whatever. And so that's how that all started. You asked me about the women's revolution, and if that group of women kind of got it started. I think that what happened is like WWE at that time, they still had the women so suppressed into like 30-second matches with 2 minutes total for entrance and exit, you know. And TNA had been giving women time to actually display their athleticism. And that's kind of the part of the reason for the other girls, not all of them, by the way, but for the ringleaders, to try to justify not wanting me to be at TNA, because I was dubbed as especially after the first year at TNA, after I ended up in a relationship with a certain person, I was dubbed as the Michelle McCool. That's what they would say. So all these people that are faked Michelle McCool to her face, every last one of those girls were calling me Michelle McCool when I started dating him. So let them take it for what it is, including Kia, who said that she loves Michelle McCool. I was like, oh, you love Michelle McCool, so when you called me the Michelle McCool of TNA, you mean it in a good way? Yeah.
All right. So in TNA, you started dating, and I'll mention the name, and I'll ask you about this. How did you and Kurt Angle end up together?
I have no idea. It was crazy. When I got to TNA, I had been in a long-term relationship with Heath Miller. I think he's called Heath Slater now.
Oh. Okay.
When I met Heath, I was at Deep South, and he worked at Abercrombie & Fitch in the mall. And we kept our relationship on wraps because I knew how much, well, I did. He didn't really care. Like, he's kind of like, it is what it is kind of guy, you know? But I just told him it's best for you because I never talked to him about what was going on at practice with Bill, you know? But once I was released and it was looking like he was going to get signed, I was like, I'm going to fade into the background because if Bill finds out that me and you are together, you're not going to get signed. And so we kept the relationship quiet. And I guess long story short, Heath is a really good guy. And I remember all of our friends had started getting engaged and getting married. Like, we started dating in Atlanta. We moved to Tampa together. And I was just like, okay, why am I still your girlfriend? And why are we living together like we're married, but there's no ring on my finger? And that started coming up. And we had always gone, spent all of our holidays together with our families, like my grandma and like his mom. We all went on vacations together. And Thanksgiving of 2008, I don't know what happened, but for some reason his mother bought him a plane ticket to West Virginia, and we were supposed to be going to see my family and his family, like, on our own. And he came home and told me that, like, he's going to West Virginia and leaving me in Tampa by myself for the holiday. And I something just kind of clicked, and I was like, all right. There had been some incidents where his ex-girlfriend at the time had been calling him while we were together, and I knew she was going to be home for Thanksgiving. And back then, like, after I made this impulse decision, I was like, I acted too soon. I should have trusted him, but it ended up being right. So he went to West Virginia, and I hung out with a college friend over that Thanksgiving, and I'm still going to TNA and taping, you know, and he had no cell reception in his town, so I wasn't really hearing from him, and my imagination was going crazy because this ex-girlfriend's there. Like, his mom loved the ex-girlfriend at the time, and like, when we would go to his house for Christmas, there was pictures of this girl up in the house when I would come. So I remember just being like, he's with her. I just had this gut feeling. So when he came back from West Virginia, and there were some other things where I had caught some voicemails from her on his phone, and he was like, it's nothing, I'm with you. And I just didn't believe him. And I think he was probably telling the truth at the time, but I'm just like, I don't believe you. And long story short, when he came back after that, that was kind of like the last straw. And so I still remember the day he ran up the stairs and he was so happy to be back home. And I was like, I want you to put in the notice on the apartment. I was like, we need to not live together anymore. And he was like, what? And I was like, yeah. I was like, I don't want to be with you anymore. I was like, I'm done. Like, and so he was like, okay, fine. And I was thinking, like, okay, I meant it, but I was hoping that he'd be like, okay, no, you know, let's work this out, you know, but the ultimatum didn't go like kind of how I wanted it to. And he had been talking about ring shopping and stuff like right before he left. And I just kind of was like, okay, I'm done talking about it. And so that's kind of how the breakup happened. And so we split up, and I'm thinking I'm going to be single or somehow convince him that I didn't mean what I said. That's all I'm thinking. And he was really angry with me about that. So he wasn't answering my calls or talking to me. right after that happened. And then I remember after a TNA taping about, I don't know, like, the timeline is kind of blurred right now, but I know that like sometime around that time, I was hanging out with like 30 people. I think we were in Jeremy Borash's room or something, and like everyone was just chilling. And I've never had a conversation with Kurt before at this point, not one. Like, had never talked to him. I remember one time he walked past me at TNA, and Terry Taylor was like, "Oh, you look gorgeous today, Rhaka," and Kurt was like, "Oh yeah, she is gorgeous." And like I was like, "Ew," and like that's all I remember. And then like, fast forward to this weekend where we get back from the pay-per-view. We're all chilling in the hotel room, and somehow Kurt and I ended up talking. And I don't even remember how, because we had never had a conversation before. And I can't even tell you what was going on around me, because when I actually started talking to him, I just kind of got lost in his blue eyes. And I was like in a weak, vulnerable state already, because I just broke up with the love of my life. And I don't know what happened, but I looked up and all those people that were in the room were gone. And the room didn't belong to Kurt or me. And then so we just, like, it was literally from like that moment. That was pretty much it. Like, we were just talking about life, and I started talking to him about being really upset about breaking up with Heath. And then Kurt was telling me how I did the right thing because he was like, "How can he be with you for 3 years and not marry you? That doesn't make any sense. You're too beautiful and you're intelligent." And I mean, he was like, you know, he was probably cheating on you. Like, he said everything to confirm all of my suspicions. And I don't know, it kind of felt at that moment kind of like all the pain was going away that I was feeling. And I remember that day, or that night, I don't even know what happened or how it did, but I remember he just like kissed me, and I was like, oh my God, like I feel so much better now. And then that was it. It was just a kiss. And after that, he just started calling me all the time and like checking on me and just being everything that he thought I needed at the time. And I just fell for him. Like, that was in like the first week of December. And by the end of the month, he had asked me to move to Pittsburgh, and Heath and I were not living together anymore. And he bought me a ticket to Pittsburgh, and I was like, I'll come visit. And I went up there to visit, and I was like, I got to go back home to get my stuff out of storage. And he was like, oh, don't worry about it. We'll get it. He's like, just stay. Like, don't leave. And I was like, yeah, I really don't want to leave. And then the rest is kind of history. But there's a lot of the history that no one knows. Like, no one knows about what happened between that point and, what was it, August 15th of the following year? Yeah.
Well, I mean, what happened on August 15th? Because that, kind of was the end of your TNA run. It affected you professionally. It affected you in a lot of ways. What happened here?
Well, what happened is, like, a week before that day where everything hit the media, there had been several, like, the first time that he went nuts, and that's what I'm going to call it, like, went crazy, and because it would be like, there'd be, like, no arguing or no fighting. It was all very romantic and very sincere. I felt like I was always with his family, spending time with his mom. He took me to, like, his closest friends' weddings, and I mean, we just spent every minute together. And I didn't know any of this. Remember, I'm still really green. You got to remember, I went from Diva Search to, like, basically straight into the wolf's den, right?
Right.
And so when people were like, oh yeah, you just are dating Kurt because of this. Like, let me just be real with you. Like, I wasn't even allowed to watch wrestling, and I really didn't know who Kurt was. Like, I knew him from, like, being at work with him, and I knew him from WWE developmental because, like, I had to, like, we had to watch the show every week. We had to know every storyline, everything that was going on, and, like, we'd be there, but I didn't know any gossip. I had never heard anything. I didn't even know anything about Karen. I just remember him telling me that she left him for someone else. And that's all I knew about it. And, you know, I had been working with Karen, but Karen was never nice to me and never talked to me, really. Like, not even like hi or anything. So it wasn't like, oh, I like fooling around with one of the girls' man. Like she was really disconnected from me personally. Like she never talked to me. Like I didn't know her and I didn't really care, you know.
Okay.
And so I didn't know all this backstory. So I remember when Kurt and I like officially were together, I called one of my closest friends at the time, who was Natty Neidhart, and this is like the last conversation that me and her had. And this girl, I'm speaking about Natty, like, I mean, we were so close, like, I was doing her weave, okay? Like, she's sitting in my living room, and I'm sewing her hair extensions in for her to wrestle in, you know, like, because I'm her friend. And I call her thinking, like, that we're really friends, and I say, hey, you know, Natty, I was like, you know, Heath and I aren't together anymore. I'm just telling her the story, and I was like, I don't know what happened. I was like, but I'm in love again. Like, I was like, I'm with Kurt, and she was like, Kurt Angle? And I was like, yeah. Like, she was one of the people that I told before any of it got out. And her response really shocked me. She told me, she was like, oh, that's great, Trenesha. Yeah, she was like, do that. Like, she was like, you get everything you can out of that situation. And I was like, what? Like, that's, and then I remember the conversation kind of ended, and I never heard from Natty again after that. Yeah. So anyway, that was kind of weird. Like, I always loved her, and I really just, I don't know. We were really, really close. Like, she used to agent my matches for me and train with me down in Tampa on her off time after she's been training at FCW, and that was weird. So, like, I'm just sitting here like, why is everybody, like, mad about this? Like, I don't get it. And so it had started a lot of turmoil with me backstage, and I really didn't know where it was coming from, you know. And now it didn't take long, but Kurt explained it to me. He was like, they're mad at you because you're with me. And he was like, just give it time. They're going to respect you eventually. He was like, there's nothing they can do about us being together, so they're going to have to get over it. And there's so much that happened in between. I don't know if you want me to go straight to August 15th or not, but I know that there was like some rumors that were out that Roxy and I had gotten into a fight backstage or something.
Yeah, something about a 60-day suspension because she said you worked too stiff.
So what happened is we had a match. I think it was like a battle royal or something. I don't know, like every knockout was in the ring, and I had a couple of spots with Roxy. And the bottom line truth that everybody there knows, well, everybody wants to call these websites and report things. And I will give credit to Roxy because she did clear it up, but nobody wanted to talk about that. And she didn't tell the whole story, but she did clear it up enough that people should know that none of that ever happened. But Roxy actually, this is back when it was Rising Kong time, and she was like starting petitions to have me fired from the company and things like that. And the girls were just following along with her, you know. And we were in the ring working, and Roxy and I were in the middle of an exchange, and it was time for me to feed into her for some forearms. And instead of giving me a forearm in the proper place, she just punched me in the face. And literally, I remember my lights going out. And it was towards the end of the match. So when we got backstage, I was like, you just punched me in the face. Like, you know when you got punched in the face. Like, you know when someone's working stiff, and you know when you get punched in the face, right? And so, yeah, I was hot when I got backstage. But Kurt had saw it from the hard camera already. So when I had got backstage, he actually had went for her too. Like, and he was like going through the roof. And so that's all that they took it and twisted it and said, oh, I went to Kurt and complained and got her fired. I don't even know why she got released. I have no idea. But I never laid a hand on her. I trusted her. And like when I see these articles recently about Sexy Star taking advantage of someone and all these wrestlers are uprising against her for being stiff on what was like an armbar. Nobody had anything to say about Roxy punching me in the face, and TNA actually edited that part out of the match because it was so obviously a punch to the face. Okay. And so I was like, you know, I'm feeding in for you and you're going to just punch me in the face. I go, you want to fight? Let's fight for real. Like right here. I was like, you want to fight me? Don't sucker punch me. Fight me right here, you know? And everybody saw it. Vince Russo was there, the guy who can't remember my name anymore. Like they all know what happened, but like, unfortunately for these fans, you're never going to get the truth. Not right away. You're going to get the version that they want you to believe to protect who they want to protect. And I remember telling Roxy, I go, why would you do that to me? I thought you were my friend, because she was one of the ones that I thought was my friend. And she was like, no, we are friends. We are, you know. And I was just like, how are you my friend? Like, I don't get it. And I don't know. I think in the interview that she did, that she mentioned that we were friends, you know, but after that punch to the face, we never really talked like we used to before, because we did used to be pretty cool. But
yeah, we
like Terry Taylor told me,
and I think she
yeah,
mentioned that. So yeah, it might have been this show back then. I'm not sure. She done a few of those.
So yeah, I'm gonna keep going on the timeline. I'm sorry, but so I'm just trying to give you like a feel for like what it was like for me dating Kurt. It wasn't like I had any privilege. Actually, it was quite the opposite. It was actually like, when I would get to the locker room or come back in to get dressed, like half of my gear would be missing. My laptop would be vandalized. And I'm talking about someone like picked it up and like bashed it into the wall and cracked it in half. Like it was stuff happening constantly. And I just kept showing up to work like whatever. And Kurt just kept telling me, oh, you know, don't worry, you'll be out of here soon. Meanwhile, they don't know that when I went home with him every night, and when we weren't working, that I was dealing, and I was young back then, and I had never encountered like a heroin or drug addict before. I didn't know, but I knew that like I literally thought he was going to drink himself to death. And I remember him having like that skull dip in his mouth and falling asleep in his recliner with it and choking on it and having to like scoop it out of his throat, and being in the elevator with him and another wrestler, and this person's actually, I think, yeah, he's employed by WWE right now, handing him a handful of like Vicodin or whatever in the elevator. And, you know, I sit there and just wait till we get to the room, and I say, hey, give me those pills. Don't take those. You know, you told me that because he had told me that, I believed him. He told me that he had cured himself from his pill addiction. And I was like, you can't take one. I go, if you told me you were taking 50 a day, I was like, you can't start again. And they don't know that when I tried to intervene with his drug use, that he would demolish hotel rooms and slam me into walls. That night he had like thrown me across the room because I asked him not to take drugs, and he just went nuts. And so like I hit my head on like the nightstand, and I was like, I'm going to sell this. Like I'm out. Right. Cause I'm like, I don't want him to come back at me again. And so I just laid there, and he came over to me, and he's like, he screamed this at me. God is my witness. He goes, you want to pretend like you're knocked out like Karen? You want to act like Karen? And he picked me up by my hair and pulled my head back, and all I remember is like, I'm going to still act like I'm out. And then I felt his teeth go into my face, and he literally bit me in my nose, and he left marks in my face. So when I disappeared off of TV at the same time as Roxy, it wasn't because I was suspended. It's because I had bite marks in my face.
What was the straw that broke the camel's back?
There had been several other incidents between that incident and then like the one that was like a week prior to August 15th. He actually had, I had gotten to the point now where I was like, if he comes near me or touches me again, I'm going to dial 911. And an incident had started to brew. Like they came out of nowhere. I never knew how they were provoked. I never knew how they were coming. And he started to walk towards me and he was screaming at me. And he grabbed a hold of me, I remember, and I had my BlackBerry in my hand. And I turned around and I started running to towards the bathroom so that I could get in there and shut the door and dial 911. But he got in there with me and we were in there wrestling for the phone. And I had already hit 911 and then he hung it up. And
They come anyway.
Well, I hit 911 and he hung up the phone. And so then I took off running out into the front yard screaming help. And like at that time, like the neighbors across the street, they were like Hindu. Don't think they spoke any English. And the lady's like walking by in her turban, pushing a stroller. And I'm like, help. And she was just like, looked at me and just kept going. And I was like, oh my God. Like, and I don't even remember how I ended up back in the house. Like, he was like, I'm sorry, or whatever, you know, and I just kind of got quiet. And I was getting ready to leave out of town, like within a day or two of that happening. I was going to a baby shower down in Fort Lauderdale from my teammate from Florida State. And that was kind of what woke me up. When I got to Fort Lauderdale, Kurt bought my ticket and my rental car to get to the baby shower. Like, and I had my own money, but he was like, oh, let me get it for you. Of course, you know how they do. And I was like, all right, fine, you know. And I remember telling him just to buy me a one-way ticket because I don't know when I'm coming back. And when I get down to Fort Lauderdale and I'm with all my teammates from Florida State, I started waking up. And I remember I was, now this teammate of mine, she was my best friend and my roommate in college and my teammate. So when the baby shower was over, I stayed with her for like a few more days because I think that maybe her husband may have went out of town or something. And so she was really, really pregnant, like about to deliver any time. And so I stayed with her, and Kurt was like blowing me up the whole time I was there, because I didn't come back when I anticipated I would. And I remember looking at his handprints on my arms, like, because that's how tightly he had gotten a hold of me that day. And then I had some gashes on me as well. And I remember sitting in the guest room at her house and just being like, I can't go back there. Like being around my teammates and being with my best friend that I hadn't seen for years. I remembered who I was, basically. And I get back to Pittsburgh eventually, but once I do get there, you know, Kurt had been calling me so much, and I wasn't answering and I wasn't checking the voicemails. He was leaving, which I still have. I still have all of those, because he was leaving me like novels in my voicemail box and text messages about please come back. I know you don't want to, like all kinds of crazy stuff. I hadn't even said anything. He was like, you're about to win the belt. You're getting everything you want. Like TNA is about to push you. Like these are the things that are in my voicemail. And I didn't even get these voicemails until I was out of there. But anyway, so I get back to Pittsburgh, and it had just been a month before that where Kurt flew to Illinois to meet my family because he said that I spent so much time with his family that he wanted to meet mine and all this other craziness. And when I get back there, he was like, we need to talk. I want to talk to you. And there was something just eerie about it. And I don't even know to this day what he wanted to talk about, but I just kept feeling, and this feeling had come to me more than once, but it was stronger than ever this time. I just kept feeling like death. I just kept feeling danger and like imminent death. Like I was like, what am I doing back here? I'm like, why did I come back here? You know? And even my teammate, like after everything came out, she's like, why did you go back? Why didn't you tell me that he had done this? You know, why didn't you tell me? And I'm like, I hadn't told anyone. But so I'm literally at my wit's end at this point, and I go outside on the phone, which I used to always do. I used to always be outside on the phone talking, and like walking around the neighborhood, and I'd be either talking to my grandma, my mom, or I used to actually talk to Adrienne, who's Ember Moon now. I used to be on the phone with her. I used to be on the phone with her a lot when I was there. But this time I called my mom, and I just spilled my guts. I'm sorry, I thought my phone was dying. So yeah, I literally was like, Mom, and she was like, what? And I was like, I have to tell you something, and she was like, what? And so I just spilled the guts. I'm like, I was like, he bit me in the face, he knocked out my teeth. I was like, he's doing this. I was like, he told me that he knew why Chris Benoit killed his wife. He can understand now that he met me, and and now that he knows me and Karen, he knows why Chris Benoit did what he did, and like he's saying things like this. And then I was like, oh my God, he's looking at me. Like he never would be staring at me out the window, but he kept coming back and checking on me. And so my mom was like, she's like, just play it off. She was like, go back into the house and do everything I say and put me on speakerphone. She was like, go in there and ask him what he wants for dinner. And I want you to tell him to say hi to me so he knows I'm on the phone. And I'm like, I don't know where she's going with this. And I'm like, why? I was like, why do you want me to do this? And, I'm thinking I'm just going to go back in the house and go to sleep, wake up the next day and pack and get ready to go to Orlando because had a big TV taping coming up where they had started the tag titles, and, I was set to have the title. And, I'm just like, I just wanted to tell her so that somebody knew because I hadn't said anything. And let me take that back. I had said something. I had tried to call Heath a few times and tell him what was going on, but he was pretty much done with me at this point. Yeah. And then that girl that I was suspecting that he was with, that's the girl he's married to now. So long story short, my suspicions were right. So anyway, yeah. So so I had called him and left him some voicemails and tried to tell him like I'm in danger, like, but he just wasn't hearing it, I guess I wouldn't have listened either. He was pissed off at me. But so my mom was like, go ahead and go in there. So I followed her instructions. I went in and I was like, hey, my mom says hi. And he's like, oh, hey, like she said hi to him or whatever. And then I asked him what he wanted for dinner. And like my mom, like, yeah, I grew up in a very like Caucasian place. And my mom is from the south side of Chicago, so she's very street smart. Like she grew up in Cabrini Green, like where the Candy Man is from. So she's walking me through this escape. And I don't know that this is all about to happen. And so I'm like, what do you want for dinner? And he picks the same thing we used to eat all the time, which was salmon. I'm like, all right, I'm going to rent a Giant Eagle and go grab it. And so I grabbed my car keys, and he's like, oh, don't take your car, take mine. And I'm like, okay. And I don't have my mom on speaker on the phone anymore. She's like, you just take his car, just go. And so he threw me the keys. I took his keys, and I get in the car, pull out of the driveway. I'm driving. She's like, are you gone? Are you out of there? I was like, yes. And she's like, okay, now drive straight to the police station and tell them everything that you just told me.
Wow.
And I was like, no. I was like, I'm not going to the police. I was like, I have to go to work tomorrow. I was like, I have a flight to catch. I'm winning the belt. I'm finally like getting somewhere. Like I've been through too much. I'm not going to the police. I go, if I go to the police, I'm going to get fired. And she's like, if you don't go to the police, you're going to be dead and you're not going to have a belt. And so I went ahead and went to the police station, and I really didn't want to be there. And she waited all the way until I got to the desk, and she heard me ask for an officer, and she was like, okay, I'm going to let you go now. Call me back when you get done. and this is at like 7:30 at night, I think, maybe 8 or so. And so I didn't tell them everything that she told me to say. I just said this because I was like, okay, I'm going to do it my way. I was like, I just wanted to make an incident report or whatever you guys do, like information report. And they were like, what do you want to make a report about? And I didn't know that when I walked into the Moon Township Police Station that they already knew me there. So they were looking at me weird. And I was just kind of like, well, I just want to make a report that, like, if something happens to me or if I go missing, that I'm dead. And I left out something very important. Another thing that happened was when I had, a little bit before I had left town, I had found a bullet in the house, and Kurt had told me there was no guns in the house. And he told me that a fan in the UK gave it to him like a day after I asked him where the bullet came from. And I had never seen a bullet before. So, like, all this stuff was, like, adding up. So so I told the police, like, I found a bullet in the house. I don't believe his story. I go, if something happens to me, he knows who did it or he did it. And I'm not missing. I'm probably dead. And they were like, okay. And I was like, all right, thank you. And I turn around and I'm like, I'm out of here. And they go, ma'am, you can't leave. They're like, we need you to put that in writing. And I was like, I'll give you my name. I was like, oh, I don't want to make a big deal out of this, you know? And they were like, you giving us your name that's not going to work. We need a written statement. You can't just walk in here and say someone's going to kill you and then leave.
Right.
And there's an airplane flying overhead. I'm sorry. So, like 25-year-old me thought that was fine. Like, they know, I gave my address and I'll just, like, that's crazy. Like, I was willing to die. Like, if I look back at it, and like, that's just kind of the mindset that you get trapped in when you're in an abusive relationship. I was like, yeah, if I die, I die, like that's just crazy to me. I just can't believe that I thought of that, thought like that. And so what happened is when they saw that I was resistant, they said, okay, fine. They were like, go ahead and go back to your house. And I was like, okay. And they go, but wait a second, we want to let you know something. And I was like, what? They go, we know who you are, and he's already been here about you several times. And I was like, for me? I was like, why? I was like, whatever he said, it isn't true. I was like, I haven't done anything to him, so I don't care what he said. And they were like, oh, no, he didn't accuse you of anything. What he said is that he's worried that you're about to commit suicide. And I was like, what? Yes. Kurt had been going to the police station, the Moon Township Police Station, and making reports that I was suicidal when I'm not suicidal, never have been. Like, I'd never kill myself because I believe I'd go straight to hell. Like, nothing's worse than that. So it's never even crossed my mind. And when they told me that, I was like, okay. So I went ahead and went back to the back room and wrote my statement. And when I started writing the statement, I went all the way back to the first incident where he bit me in the face, and I wrote everything that happened. And they started calling detectives in the room, and it got really, really like weird because there was probably like 5 people in the room. 3 of them were detectives, and I had mentioned to the officer once I signed my written statement. Like, they all sat down and they read it. And then, because it was like a novel, like I think I wrote a book that day. And,
you should release it because I think that would.
Yeah. So that's another topic. But, so anyway, what happened is, they were like, do you have any proof of any of this? And, I took my BlackBerry. And I was like, you guys can have my phone. I go, everything is in here. And, like, I just handed the police my phone. And so they were like, okay. And so they called in a forensic officer. Sorry, there's like a motorcycle going by now. So they called in an officer that does forensics, those special investigators. And they siphoned everything off of my phone. And they also were, like, scrolling through what they could see as well. And when they read through all the messages from Kurt in my phone and they looked at the reports he made and they looked at the reports I made, they told me at that moment, now this is like the sun is about to come up now. That's how long I've been there. They're like, you're not going back. We legally cannot allow you to go back to that house. We need you to go down to the magistrate and get a protection order immediately. Your life is in danger. And so that's what I did. Actually, the police took me down to the night judge, and I still had bruises and scratches on me from that previous attack. So everyone keeps saying, oh, she stayed at his house for a whole week after he did this. Well, the truth of the matter is that's not true. I was in Fort Lauderdale for a whole week after he did it. And when I came back to Pittsburgh and realized that I was still in some weird danger, that's when I went to the police. So I didn't stay for 9 days. I was in Fort Lauderdale for 9 days. And Kurt knows that. And I mean, he bought the plane ticket, and
Right.
it was either him or Giovanna actually that picked me up from the airport. Probably Giovanna, I want to say. So anyway, went to the night judge and told her what happened the week prior and showed her that I still had marks on my body from it. And she issued a protection order. I left with the officers. We went back to the house. They had like a fleet of like bulletproof SUVs. I was in like a bulletproof Cadillac. An officer went up to his house, knocked on the door, told him he had like a few minutes to get his stuff and get out. They watched him leave. I'm still in the SUV, and he left. And then all the other officers started to leave. And then Angela Zane, who was the officer that kind of stuck with me through all of this, she stayed with me until the coast was clear. And she's like, all right, the house is yours. You can go in now. And I was like, what? You want me to go in there so he can send someone here to kill me? I was like, I am not going back in there. I was like, can you wait right here so I can grab some things? I'm not going back in there. So I loaded up as much stuff as I could into my Jeep, and then I just left and I went to Starbucks. And I remember Kurt doing some interviews saying he had surveillance tape of me following him out of the neighborhood, which I'm sure he's never been able to produce because that's just not what happened. And then we all know what happened at Starbucks. The police reports and the complaints are very accurate as to what happened. That's like the only true story that's out. But of course, the good old judicial system allowed him to not have to pay any penalty for that. So, yeah.
Oh boy. So, I mean,
this is like a much longer. This is like a long story. I've left out so much information.
I said jokingly, but I think you should do a book. I mean, if you wanted to get this story out there fully, you should sit down, pen and paper, and put out a book because it's riveting stuff. That's for sure.
I have been working on a memoir actually, just about not just him and that, but like the whole experience. But it wasn't necessarily a wrestling book. Wrestling just happened to be the backdrop. Because I've gotten really deep into the study of malignant narcissism and sociopaths. That's intriguing things. Like some of the most watched TV shows include characters like that. Like Dexter and all that stuff. And that's pretty much what it was. But then again, on the other side, a lot of people do really know how much of a monster that he was. I don't know what he is right now, but they knew. Like, they just did it. They just didn't. Yeah.
That's kind of my question. And part of the reason this interview took place today is that you put out some tweets and kind of started to let your opinion be heard again after being almost radio silent for about 7 years or so, 7+ years. What made you decide to kind of say, hey, remember when this happened, and put that back in people's minds?
Well, I actually, I had no other choice but to do that, and here's why. Remember at the beginning of this interview, I told you how I was living the American dream, happily married, and, well, I didn't say happy. I don't think I did. Married with kids and all that good stuff. Well, I ended up breaking one of my own cardinal rules, and that was that I was never dating a worker again, right? I ended up I ended up married to one, and this gentleman, if you will, he used to be hanging out backstage at TNA all the time. Like
wrestler here.
Yeah, the guy that I'm married to right now, he was like literally willing to like mop the floor if they needed him to. He just wanted a job there so bad. But he used to tag with my friend Bobby that I mentioned had started training with Marty Jannetty back in the day, and like I had met this guy back in 2005, and we had always just been friends. Like I always had a boyfriend, so I wasn't like paying him really any attention like that, but I just thought he was cool, and we would chit chat here and there, and over the years our chit chats started getting like much longer and like into overnight conversations, and then one of the boys hit me up and was like, hey, you know, he's married, and this is like back in like 2000 and I don't know. It was a long time after I met him. And so I hit him up and I'm like, you know, nothing had happened between us, but we had been like way too chummy with each other for him to be married, right?
Right.
And spending the whole night on the phone with me. So I was like, yo, like, someone said you're married. And then like he totally admitted to it and was like, you know, I'm sorry I lied to you. You're too good of a person. I was like, you know what? This is back when I used to like cuss all the time. I was like, you know what, F you, get the F out of my face. I was like, you are a dirtbag. I don't talk to married men. Like, I just don't do that. And you're sitting here on the phone with me all night long and you have a wife. I'm like, where is she? I was like, who is she? I go, is it this chick? I'm like, I've never seen, like, what are you? Who are you? Okay, anyway, it doesn't matter. Leave me alone. And I actually said, never talk to me again. And he was like, you mean that? Why can't we be friends? I was like, I can't be friends with someone who's married. I don't know your wife. Like, you can't have a friend and be married that you're attracted to. Like, leave me alone. And so he did. And then fast forward to like, oh gosh, like 2014, late 2014, he had approached me again. It had been like 4 years since I'd talked to him. I had completely forgotten about him. And he approached me again. He had given me this whole story about how he's out of the wrestling business. He's not interested in and this has everything to do with why I released the information, so just bear with me. So he had told me he's out of the wrestling business and he changed his life around. He joined the United States Army. He's deployed right now. So we're having these conversations on like WhatsApp and Skype. And I was just blowing him off, you know, and like I was like, okay, that's great. Happy for you. You know, I didn't remember why I had stopped talking to him. It didn't matter anymore. I was just like, okay, cool. I just was in a whole different place right then at that time, and not interested in dating or anything. So I wasn't really giving him much play, but he had known me for so long. He knew finally what he needed to say to get me to talk to him. So he was like, I was engaged and my fiance cheated on me. And as soon as I deployed, she started dating a Hall of Famer's nephew and broke off our engagement so she could make it on TV. And I was like, oh my gosh, like being a wrestler, I'm like, dang, that hurts. Like, oh my gosh, you know, like, so I started feeling bad for him. And he was like, can I get it? He's like, what scriptures do you know? He was like, I'm all the way in Kuwait. I'm so isolated. And so I really just started like praying with him and sending him scriptures. And I remember the first scripture I sent him was like Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, you know, says the Lord, plans of good and not of evil, for an expected end, a hope and a future. And I just started sending him all these inspirational quotes, not quotes, but scriptures out of the Bible. And then we started talking, and let me keep going and fast forward, like the text turned into Skype sessions, and then the Skype sessions started looking like our phone calls from the years before, where we were like falling asleep on the phone together. And then when he came back from his deployment, we had already decided like we were going to get married. And I had been single for 4 years, and I had not dated I hadn't even like had like a date. Okay. Like, and I was okay with that. Like, I seriously was like, all right, Lord, I guess the rapture's going to happen and I'll never be married. Like, I'm okay with that, you know, at this point. And then this guy pops back up into my life with his whole changed life and telling me how it broke his heart that he couldn't be with me. And at this point now, he told me he had been divorced from the wife he didn't tell me about before for like 3 years. And he gave me this whole spiel about how she used him to get citizenship. And I'm like, gosh, this guy just keeps getting done so wrong. Like, and I felt so bad for him. Well, we get married, and he turned out, let me just put it this way, he basically turned out to be the Kurt I dated in a whole different body. Everything started off the same, like romantic, like storybook, this, that, the other. My mom actually married us. She did the wedding ceremony. And like fast forward to like some things happened between now and then, but like fast forward to October 8th of 2016, it had come to a point of confrontation about all of the outlandish things that he had done, and like him refusing to get psychological help. Because when I married him, although I realized there was like a lot of issues, I was like, well, I'm married, so it doesn't matter. I'm going to have to work these things out with him. And he would always tell me he would get them worked out. And I'm like, dude, like he's black, and he even actually like started to look like Kurt to me a little bit. It was really strange. Like they actually kind of do favor each other a little bit. It's weird. I don't know if it's like they're the spirits inside of them or whatever it is, but I know that the weird thing about it is when we got married, I remember on his Facebook, he still had a picture of him and Kurt Angle together. And I was like, don't you think you'd like to like take that down? Like, that's kind of weird. You got a picture of him. And he's like, oh, he's like, I forgot that was there. Like, so he's basically like pretending like, basically he's a fan that just wanted to become a wrestler. Like, and I'm not saying like fan of the business, like literally like sort of worshiping these people. And this has a lot to do with why I ended up having to release the tweets and the screenshots. So on October 8th, we had gone on a little family getaway for like in an attempt for him to make up for some things that he had done the week prior. And we began talking about the things that he had done. Instead of just enjoying the vacation, like I was still mad. And like somehow it came up, and so we started talking about it again. And he was confessing to everything that he had done. And I guess kind of like Bill DeMott, how I can say like I can thank Bill. I guess I can thank Kurt right now because I started realizing the patterns of his behavior and seeing how identical they were to Kurt's. And so I took out my phone, something I couldn't do back in 2008 with a BlackBerry, and I hit the record button on him while he was confessing to everything that he had done, because if anybody else talked to him about it, it never happened. And he found out that he figured out I was recording him like an hour into him confessing to everything that he had done, and also telling me he didn't deserve me. He was telling me like the devil is making him do things. Like these are things like I would hear Kurt say. I'm like sitting there like, oh my God, like same demon, different face. And he's like, the devil's making me destroy my family. You're the only woman that really loved me, and you gave me a family and this and that. And he's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to be a man, and da-da-da-da-da. And like, you're a perfect mother. You're a perfect wife. He's like, I just don't understand what to do to make you happy. And I'm like, you need to be happy with yourself. That's the problem. And that's another thing with Kurt. I'm saying, like, you need to love yourself. Like, a lot of these people don't love themselves. I don't care how. You put on a military uniform and people are saluting you, and you hate yourself. You know, you put on a gold medal and people are like praising you and bowing to you, and you come home and you still hate yourself. Like, this is what I've been witnessing, you know? And so I'm trying to talk to him about loving himself and all this stuff. And then he realizes that I'm recording him because I need this recording so I can play it back to him, because he has this like amnesia about things that he confesses to and does. And so he decided to, I don't know how he caught on to it. It must have been the way I held my phone, because it had been on for like an hour already. And so he just went ahead and asked me, like in the middle of like spilling his guts out about how great I am. He's like, oh, you're recording this? And he was like, good. And I was like, I'm like a legal nerd too, by the way. Like I love like the Constitution and law and the court system. So I'm thinking like, ooh, I got consent to record now, you know? So maybe that's when I moved my phone around. And then, so he said something to me like, why don't you give me your phone? And, I was like, why? And I was like, I don't have anything to hide. I was like, you always have my phone. He's like, well, give it to me then. And then he just like literally lunged and attacked me physically. He actually beat me unconscious because I was recording him. And I posted the pictures on Facebook already, and some screenshots of him apologizing for it. And for like several months, like I'm telling you, he actually got arrested for violating my protection order, just like Kurt. He came to my front door and brought wine and a love letter on my birthday at midnight. He came to, I had made a debut back to wrestling with XCW, and I had walked out to the ring, and he was sitting right there in the front row. This is after the assault, okay?
When
And I have,
this year?
this was December 17th of 2016.
Okay.
And I have a stay away order, like, 1,000 feet, and he's sitting in the front row, like ringside, basically, maybe like a row back. And so, and then he, like I said, he also came to the house on Christmas, and he actually got arrested on a warrant for violating a protection order for that, which, whatever. He's asking for a jury trial now to explain how he wasn't there, kind of like how Kurt wasn't at Starbucks that day.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Yeah. And so even though all of that happened, he was still like trying to get back together with me and sending me these quotes, and he started like morphing the more he saw I was standing my ground, because like that was like a one shot, you're out. Like that's why I said I can thank Kurt for this, because if I hadn't experienced that, I wouldn't know, like, okay, you got to get out on the first time, And I just stood my ground, and he was like, if you don't drop the protection order, I'm going to divorce you. And I was like, okay. I was like, I'm not even thinking about that. I'm getting a protection order, okay? You punched me, like he beat me until I lost consciousness, and he thinks that he like a week later, he asked me I think it was like 4 days later. He was like, hey, what's for dinner? Like, because the military had put him on, made him stay in the barracks or whatever after the assault. And he was like, hey, my time is up in the barracks. Like, what's for dinner? Like, and here I am sitting here with my eyes swollen shut with 2 children looking at me like, Mommy, what happened to your eye?
Right.
And I was just like, you got to be crazy, And he was like calling my family, crying and all this stuff. So long story short, let me fast forward. So when he saw none of that was going to work, because that used to work on me before. With Kurt, when he would cry and like do all that stuff, I would cry too, and we would trauma bond. Like the psychological term for it is trauma bonding. Well, I'm not that 25-year-old girl anymore. Like there's none of this toxic psychological disorder, empath, narcissist dynamic going to happen, especially not with 2 children involved. And so his command, so the crime happened on base. So if anyone's wondering why he's not in jail, the crime happened on base, and his commander decided to cover up the crime for him. He saw the injuries to my face, and he said that he is not a doctor, so he doesn't know what happened to my eye, and he just decided to let it go. And so that gave I even don't even like to call him my husband. Like that gave him some fuel. So he switched from trying to get me back to trying to take my life. Basically, it's like the same pattern. But he he can't come to the house, without me dialing 911 or something. So what he's trying to do, and what he's been doing on his Facebook page, he's been when Kurt had, I guess I found out that Kurt's DVD was coming out from him. Like he posted it on his Facebook page. And then he started, I was getting word back from the Army personnel when I'm following up to the crime that was committed against me. I'm getting word back from them that they heard I did this before. And his attorney has been going around the courthouse, and even the district attorney, because I've been trying to get the state of Texas to take jurisdiction of the case away from the military because they won't prosecute it. And this is an epidemic in the military. There's a lot of women that have reached out to me to share their story and say that the same exact thing had happened in their life with the domestic violence or sexual assault by a service member that they're married to. They a lot of times, like, they just sweep it under the rug and tell the wife to get out of town and get over it. And especially like with my husband, because he's a good mechanic. And when all of this happened, they were getting ready to deploy, and they needed him. and so they couldn't have him in any trouble, you know. So with him spreading all this, I have the district attorney in El Paso, Texas, coming to me and bringing up Kurt Angle. Now, this is just like this year, okay? And I have military personnel making decisions that they're not going to prosecute because he presented evidence from dirt sheets that I like to frame gold medalists and Army heroes. And this is the picture that has been being painted. So when we're getting ready to go into the hearing, you know, and everyone's like, well, you know, you never said anything back. Like, this stuff is still on the internet. And I just kind of like, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I was like, forget it. You know, and here's the problem. My husband already knows the truth about the Kurt Angle situation because remember I told you he was backstage at TNA all that time? Remember I told you that he was on the phone with me for hours?
Yeah.
He was very well aware of what was going on with Kurt and I.
Yeah.
So he has now started using Kurt Angle as his defense in court for the crime he committed.
Oh, man.
You mentioned the book, right? So I had actually started working on the memoir, and my husband's a great artist. I don't want to give anything away but I have a very unique approach to this book. And my husband was drawing it has a lot of graphic art in it, like comic book style.
Right.
And he had already started illustrating pages for it. All those text messages and screenshots and emails that I put on the internet, my husband already read all of those. Plus, he was there when everything was happening, and he's also listened to the voicemails and seen the messages that I haven't released.
Right.
And with all of that, he has been going and litigating his innocence based upon the Kurt Angle incident. He actually even testified in court at one of our hearings. His attorney was like, "Is your wife violent? Can she fight?" And I was like, "What the hell?" Like, I don't remember the last time I was in a fight. And then he was like, "Oh, yeah." And he was like, "Have you seen her beat anyone up?" And he was like, "Yeah." He was like, "And I've seen the aftermath of it, too." Speaking about the Roxy incident that he knows never happened. So, you know, I just, like, forget it. I have nothing to lose. And I'm sorry that the timing happened when, I guess, Kurt was having this whole DVD release come out. I didn't know about that. But at that point in time, it was like, I either put this out there or I let him keep trying to use it against me because he knows that I was just waiting to put it in my book and put it out. And I was like, forget it. I don't care. Like, I'm going to post it because the next time his lawyer goes to the district attorney who has to prosecute these crimes or goes to the judge off record and tells her to Google me so that I don't look credible in court,
right,
then they're going to see everything. I want them to see my side too because, for like 7 or 8 years I've said nothing. And the reason why I've said nothing is because it's been irrelevant to me. Like, I moved on with my life.
And we've gone way over time, but I just wanted to kind of wrap up with where you're basically going with this question. Overall, other than, you know, the repeated pattern, are you satisfied with how everything turned out, and are you happy in and of yourself?
You know, like, the thing about it is I can see the future, and I know that all this stuff that we just discussed with my current relationship, it had to happen. It's like pushing me into the point where I should have been before. Like, a lot of times when you run from things, and like I say, I moved on, but really I just kind of ran, you know. I didn't think I was running, but I did. Like, I started going by my middle name. I was telling people my name was Danielle, you know, like, because when I went back to Tampa, like, it was brutal. Like, Bubba the Love Sponge is there. People were coming in and being like, "Oh, you're the girl Bubba talked about on the radio." So I tried to change my identity. Like, I just went back into real estate, you know, like, I just got a whole different group of friends, like, that didn't care about wrestling. And then I come full circle 7 years later, and I'm married to another wrestler who throws a scenario back in my face again, literally. And so, yeah, I'm satisfied because now I know that I'm facing the giant this time. I'm not backing down. It's nothing personal against Kurt. This is about my own life, my own redemption. It's my story. No one can take it from me. And I've had my 5-year-old daughter ask me over the years, "Mommy, like, why aren't you wrestling anymore?" And I don't have a story. I don't have an excuse to tell her. Like, there's no reason. why my time should have been cut short. And that's no example or legacy to leave for my kids, like just to leave it open, you know? And so that's, I mean, they're really motivating me. And I'm pretty much done with just sitting back and letting people say whatever, because I used to just not care. And I really don't care anymore. But at this point, it's like a legal matter, and people are trying to use false statements. And I don't know why, if Kurt is so much better now, why hasn't he, and I think they said he went to AA. And from my understanding, don't you have to apologize to all the people that you wronged while you were on drugs? You know, like, or don't you, isn't there something about like going backwards and righting your wrongs? Okay, so where am I on the list? Because like, I don't know if that was like a big joke or whatever, but when they were like Kurt's big secret, I was kind of like, are you kidding me? Like, is somebody going to tell what happened? Because a lot of people know this already. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're facing everything now. And
yeah.
This was an eye-opener. I kind of jokingly said to you on Facebook, hey, I wrote out the questions, and I think it'll be 20 to 40 minutes. Obviously, we blew that out of the water, but I really appreciate you taking the time and telling this side of the story, which has never been told before. And again, like I said at the beginning of the interview, I appreciate that you agreed to do it with us.
Yeah, no problem. And I thank you for reaching out. Yeah, I've been very selective about who I've spoken to. You're the second person I've talked to, and I don't know if I'll talk to anyone else. Because, like I said, there's things pending, but maybe I will. Just depends. But I like your Facebook post. So then I was like, yeah, I'll go ahead and talk to him.
There's two versions of, and I jokingly say this. There's two versions of me. There's me who talks to people and does the radio show and all that, and then there's the Facebook me who says the most offensive things possible just to elicit a response from people.
I'm really like cracking up laughing now. Yeah, I was like, his posts are hilarious. I was like, let me go ahead. I'll do one with him.
Just try and piss people off. That's my goal, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure. One last favor from you. Do you mind if I ask you if I could just get a station ID saying this is Trenesha Biggers and you're listening to Interactive Wrestling Radio?
Sure. This is Trenesha Biggers, and you are listening to Interactive Wrestling Radio.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Darewolf PJ Black, and you're listening to Interactive Wrestling Radio.
I'm addicted to danger. That's why I put my body on the line in the ring.
This is one of the most exciting and dynamic athletes.
I'm the Darewolf PJ Black, and I fear nothing.
Darewolf on Lucha Underground Season 3. New episode Wednesday at 8 p.m. on El Rey Network.
Sponsored by Cricket Wireless. Something to smile about.